Hi everyone, here we are back again for our hot topics for February 2024, with January seeming to be a long month. It seems to have been a bit of a gap since I was here last time, but welcome back and please say hello in the chat as always. So we've already got 3 people saying hello in the chat. Hi to David and to Alison and to Susie. So newcomers, please say hi as you join us. Remember, this live stream is open to everybody and it will be available on replay afterwards if you don't have time to stay or if you want to watch it again. I've just realised I didn't switch my phone off, so my phone is probably going to keep telling me that you're all joining. There we go. Let's get rid of that. I'll try and remember to do that next time. So I will leave them up for a few months. I still haven't decided how long to leave them up, but they won't be there indefinitely because it will get quite hard to find the new ones, I think, and find what's there. So this is the first of our live streams in February, and let's just check over who has joined us already. We have David and Alison and Susie, and David tells me you can hear me, which is always great news because I've no idea if you can hear me or not. And we have Denise, and we have Yehuva, and we have Lynn, and the I'll Get What game. So hi to everybody. Oh, and we've got Gandalf complaining because Jimmy breathed. Mr. G. Oh, excuse me. We have this new Gandalf bonking device. Yes, I can prod you with it, can't I? Yes, I can. I might keep that. That could be quite useful. Yeah, he's sitting right next to me. Jimmy is nowhere near him, but he's still grumbling. This is how he tends to be at this time of day. It is just part of his normal. He's not as bad earlier in the day, but when it gets to that kind of starting to wind down, then grumbling happens. And oh my goodness, Jimmy looked at him. So be prepared for it to happen again. So this is the first of our February live streams, our hot topics, and I'll be back again next week for our Superfan members exclusive, which is going to be about managing unwanted behaviour. And then back again on the 26th of February with our new live stream, Bits and Pieces, which is when I'll be picking up on 3 or 4 smaller topics to discuss. And I haven't decided quite what I'm going to cover for that this month yet. 2 weeks to go, plenty of time to decide. So if you do have suggestions of things you'd like me to take a quick look at in bits and pieces, then pop that in one of the videos in the comments or put it on a community post that I share on Facebook or on YouTube. And I'll also see what takes my fancy out of things I read this month anyway that I might like to talk about, because hey, there might be something interesting that crops up. So I hope you have seen our new live stream trailer courtesy of the editor. I don't have to bonk Gandalf again. That is very useful, this thing. Yes, it is, isn't it? For dotting you on the head with. Yes. It kind of rattles and it did squeak. He quite likes chewing it. We'll put it there in case we need it again. Yes, he's looking at me now. Yes, Gandalf, you can't be seen there, but I can reach you. I can. So I hope you had a chance to have a look at the new trailer before the live started. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. And I have to say, I really quite enjoyed watching it. I think watching dogs sleeping is really quite relaxing. And I loved watching Floppy's toes twitching while he was sleeping. It makes you wonder what was going on in his dreams. His little toes were all twitching independently. So if you have any suggestions for future trailers, again, let me know in the comments or somewhere else on a video's comment, or even on that trailer if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible, but let me know if you have thoughts of what you'd like to see in a trailer as well. So where are we on the comments? Mr. Piggy says hi. Hi, Mr. Piggy. And Steve says hello. And Yehuva says she likes the new trailer. Thank you. It's all the editor's work. And Alison likes the decorating video. Yeah, I spent a lot of time doing that decorating over the summer. And I figured I was spending so much time decorating that I needed to video it while I was at it to not just to record the changes to the kitchen, but hey, it kind of gets a video out of it as well, doesn't it? So that was why we recorded that. And David says he also loves the new trailer. Hi, Eva from the Czech Republic. I think that's a new one. Welcome. Now, just before we move on, I want to do some shout outs to the members. So thank you and hi to all the channel members who are with us today. You know who you are. It's very easy to sign up. And of course, if you change your mind, you can adjust your membership from month to month. And there are 3 levels you can choose from. And we very much appreciate you choosing whichever level you have chosen. And if you'd like to show your appreciation of our videos or this live stream, another option, if you don't want to become a channel member, is to use the super chat. I can't, got the wrong teeth in, to use the super chat or the super thanks to make a one-off contribution. And it all helps us keep making content for you here on YouTube. So if that's something you'd like to do, please click on the little $sign that is beside the box where you type your comments into the chat. You also may have noticed that our wish list is now up and running. I finally got round to launching that. So I'd like to thank the lovely people who have sent us things from the wish list. And the guys have asked me to pass along their thanks for your kindness this month. They have enjoyed a number of treats, and I'm going to read out the little notes that have come with them. We have already been recording footage to make short videos for these, and the editor's working on those now. So if you're the first person to send them any item on the list, we'll do a short of them enjoying that item, and you can see how my in-house testers got on with it. And I've also added an option for you to send them things that aren't on the list. So you can add in something. Oh, hello, Gunnar. You can add in something as a, I got a problem here. I've got a problem here. Yes, I have. You can also add in something that isn't on the list. So with my assistant here, we had a bag of gravy bones from Chris Armstrong. He says, I hope the hounds enjoy these gravy bones. They are Hubble's fave. And that's from Chris. Thank you very much, Chris. And from Lynn, we had a note saying, to all the houndies, these were recommended to me by Jill, so I know you like them. Mine loved them. And that was from Lynn with Skip, Sam and Naddy. So thank you very much to Lynn and the dogs for our bag of duck fillets. And then we had 2 lovely gifts from Alice and Andy and Emma the Greyhound. We had some biscuits and a note saying, enjoy your biscuits. And we're getting on to these just a minute. And we also have another note from some other balls that we received. And it says, got there in the end, because I know Alison had a few problems trying to make it work, which I think was because I've added things that are not Amazon things, and third-party sellers can cause a slight problem on the wish list. So that was some balls from Emma the Greyhound. Thank you very much, Emma the Greyhound. And just today, this that I'm trying not to have stolen, received from Barbara Gertz, do you say that? With love from Bo. And Gandalf would like to test them out now, but they're still in their string bag. So we'll save them for later, because now is not a good time to make, I can't make it squeak. To make the loud squeaking noise. Yes, Daddy. Oh dear. Who's a mummy squeaking? Oh, she's a me mum, isn't she? We're gonna get rid of those because I don't want you eating the net bag. So Gandalf is keen to appreciate this latest gift, but we're going to hide it so we can have it later. Yes, we are. Oh, look, it's gone. There is no gift. There is no gift. No, there is no gift, Mr. G. Oh, dear. So that's Mr. G and his gifts. Oh, let's just get my mouse back. Don't eat my mouse. Thank you very much, Gandalf. So you're getting kisses. Are you getting kisses here, Gandalf? And oh dear, the squeak has made Naddy jump. I have to be very careful about having squeaky sounds on the computer if I play someone else's video, or one of my videos for that matter, with dog noises, whether it's noises dogs make themselves or things that we make squeak for dogs. Then I do have problems with that. Floppy even started barking when he heard himself barking in a video. He's a bit dippy, that one. So yeah, he's still trying to get to those tennis balls, which I've hidden behind me. Yes, trying to eat the tennis balls. Yes. So thank you very much for all our gifts. And we will be starting to share videos of those in action before too long. And we look forward to receiving any more you'd care to share, because they like having gifts, don't you? So let's move on to this month's hot topic, which is not so exciting for Gandalf's, is it? No. So this month's topic that I have picked is vaccinations. And hold on, let me go back to the comments. I'm really easily distracted by the comments, attention span of a gnat. So Barbara says, I'm very happy that Gandalf likes them. And Denise has sent him kisses. And Alison says, I love our Greyhound so much, bless. And Yehuda says, I bought smaller ones for Bo as I was afraid he would eat them. I've had this size and also the size, oh dear, I shouldn't have done that, should I? The size that is the normal tennis ball size, and I find both are fine. We find they're fairly interchangeable. It doesn't cause a problem with the ones that are normal tennis ball size. So the ones one size down from this is fine. But I think there's another size down again, which I would consider a bit risky. Yeah, we're not going to eat them now. No, we're not. You're very brave, aren't you? Yeah, well, they're vanished. Yeah, they don't exist. It says they do. I smell them. I do. Don't stroke me. Give me the tennis balls. Where's trouble? He is. Right, no, he's not going to leave me alone now. But I don't want him to have them right now. Firstly, because he will squeak and then he'll wind everyone else up. Oh, he's going to sit down now. What a good chap. And also they've still got the net and I don't have any means to get them out of the net right now. No, don't sneak in and try and steal. Oh, he's going to play with this instead. Would you like the conch bunker? Would you? Do you like this instead? You can have that. Do you want that? He's still looking for the tennis balls. Do you want this? Do you want this? No, that's boring. He wants tennis balls. You'll have to make do. Right, let me crack on. Else we'll be here all day with Gandalf trying to steal tennis balls from behind me. He is trying to steal them. Well, let's put them over there. Then you can't reach them, can you? I hope. If I suddenly vanish, he's knocked me off the chair and gone in search of the tennis balls. Okay, right. So this month, would we like this now? You're going to have this now, okay? All right. Well, that's settled that. Good. He's gone. Quickly before he comes back. So this month's hot topics, vaccinations. So vaccinations help protect against serious and potentially fatal diseases. And the vaccine itself contains a small amount of a modified version of the organism that causes the disease, which teaches the immune system to defend itself against that particular disease. So if the dog is exposed to the real thing, they're less likely to become ill, or they won't become as seriously ill. So vaccines don't necessarily prevent illness, but they can reduce the severity of that illness. And it tends to be more effective in older dogs. And I distinctly remember, possibly pre-COVID, my life seems to be pre and post-COVID, but whilst I was involved with the Greyhound charity I was volunteering with over the last few years, at the boarding kennels they used, boarding dogs were required to be vaccinated on arrival. They had quite strict requirements, but two of the dogs that were boarding, who were just a few months old, I think one was 4 and one was 6, they were really quite young, less than a year, they developed parvovirus during their stay at the kennels. I believe they were Labradors, if that's right. I don't know if that's relevant or not. But anyway, these two teenage pups developed parvovirus during their stay. And one made it and the other one didn't. So although they were fully vaccinated to the high standards of the boarding kennel, they still became ill, and to the extent that one of them still died. Over the years, it's thought that the immunity builds up, but they are still at risk even if they are vaccinated when they're young. So in the UK, and I apologise to those of you elsewhere, this is very much UK focused, All dogs in the UK are typically vaccinated against 4 main diseases. So we have parvovirus, the one that those poor pups caught, which is highly contagious. It can rip through a boarding kennels or through your household if you have multiple dogs. And it's a potentially deadly disease, as we saw with those poor pups, that causes severe vomiting and diarrhea. Another key one that's vaccinated against is distemper, which has similar symptoms, vomiting and diarrhea, very serious, again, potentially fatal. And that affects a number of different organs around the body, including the gut or digestive system, the heart, the immune system, the lungs, the brain, and the nerves. So it really has quite a wide impact on the dog. And the other one that is typically vaccinated as standard is hepatitis, which, as with humans, attacks the liver, but also the kidneys, the eyes, and the blood vessels. And this is spread through bodily fluid and can survive in the environment for up to a year. So if a dog who has had hepatitis has been in an area where you're walking your dog could pick that up by picking up, say, licking where they'd been or where they'd left some drool or something, or sharing toys, something like that. There is also a fourth one, which is leptospirosis, which is a bacterial disease that causes illness by damaging vital organs, again, such as the liver and kidneys. And in humans, this is known as Weil's disease, and we tend to get it from dirty water. And the most common reason for us to catching it is water that has had rats in it that are infected, because rats carry that disease. And of course, rats are all over the place. So if they've been in that water, then you are at risk. And I know when I was at school, I was dating a lad in the sixth form with me who was a canoeist. And that was quite a big thing for canoeists, because obviously they're in river water. The risk of Weil's disease was quite a serious thing for them. When it comes to this leptospirosis vaccination for dogs, there are 2 versions, L2 and L4. And as you might imagine, they are to protect against either 2 versions or 4 versions of the disease. There is anecdotal evidence that the L4 causes more side effects. It's a newer vaccination than the L2. But when you go to the vets to have your dog vaccinated, you are probably limited to what your vet has available, because they tend to stock certain brands and certain types. And I remember a while ago at my vet, I asked about it, and they said that they had phased out the L4 and now it was L2. So my dog had to have a restart because it was a different vaccine. So those are the 4 key ones that your vet would automatically vaccinate your dog against if you went to the vets and said, my dog needs vaccinating. But there are some others, and 2 key ones that you might be offered are, firstly, kennel cough, which is recommended if your dog mixes with other dogs a lot. So if they go into a boarding kennels, they're almost certainly going to be expected to have kennel cough vaccination. And if they're going to a home boarder, they may or may not. It's not a requirement, but the home boarder might choose to. And I have seen even secure fields requiring kennel cough vaccination before the dog can use that field. So if your dog is going to mix with a lot of other dogs or has a health condition that would make kennel cough more serious, then this is something to consider. I do have mixed thoughts on this, though, because it's rather like the flu jab that we are offered. Each year, they develop the flu jab based on the versions of the flu that they think will be most prevalent. So you could still catch the flu and your flu jab does nothing because you haven't been infected by the right version of the flu for it to work. And the same applies with kennel cough. It protects against Bordetella. That's the organism that is causing the type of kennel cough that the vaccine is designed to counteract. But there are a number of different organisms that can cause a kennel cough disease. So if they've had the vaccination, they will be protected against Bordetella, but not against one of the other variations of it. There is also an issue if anyone in your household is immunosuppressed, so more susceptible to picking up infections, because we can catch this as well. And if your dog has had that vaccine, they are more likely to transmit it to someone a human, in the first 2 to 3 weeks after receiving the vaccine. So if you have someone in the household, say, who has had their spleen removed or who is having cancer treatment, it might not be appropriate for your dog to receive a kennel cough vaccination at that time. And if they're going into a boarding kennels, normally they have to have received the vaccine 2 weeks before your dog stays with them, which I think is to do with it taking 2 weeks for them to build up some immunity. Although they can still be infectious after 2 weeks, that is that key period where they can infect other dogs. And the other one that you might be familiar with, which in some countries might be more of a requirement, is for rabies. In the UK, it's generally only necessary for dogs that are going to travel in and out of the country. Depending on the vaccine, it might be given every 1 year or every 3 years, but there are quite strict timings around when the vaccine is given in relation to the time of travel. So if you are going to be traveling abroad, it's well worth looking into that quite early to make sure the vaccine is provided at the right time for your dog to be accepted across the border. Dogs in other countries may need to be vaccinated against other diseases or tested for them before being imported into the UK. Certainly in the UK at the moment, there's a big issue around regulations that have just been introduced for brucellosis, which is common in other countries, but not particularly common in the UK, as vets may refuse to treat imported dogs who have not had a negative test for brucellosis, even though the test for brucellosis is prone to providing false negatives and it's not very accurate. So there have been some issues I've seen on Facebook in a group for people who have had issues with brucellosis and dogs imported from Europe in particular, who are having problems with vets refusing to treat them, and the vet could even recommend the dog is put to sleep if they have tested positive for brucellosis. So that is an overview of the types of vaccinations that you might get in the UK. If you're not in the UK, please do let us know in the comments what vaccinations are normally given where you are in the world, if it's different to these, because that would be quite interesting to see for those of you who are watching from elsewhere, what is required where you are as well. So Angelica says, I used homeopathic kennel cough vaccine for my dogs for a while. You need to be familiar with homeopathy and committed to remember the timely repeat, but it's recognised by 2 kennels in Ireland. That's interesting. And do you know what that was, Angelica? How a homeopathic vaccine was created? That's quite, I've not heard of that. That's really quite interesting. Anyone else who's in different countries want to share with us if you have to vaccinate against different diseases? I have to say in the UK, it's not a requirement. No one comes and checks. You could never vaccinate the dog if you didn't want to, but vets will generally recommend it. And I remember as a child, we had a Westie and then we got a second Westie as a pup, and she died of parvovirus before she was old enough to have her vaccination. So, with the little one, they end up, I think, dehydrating very, very easily and get damaged so very easily that if a litter of pups gets it, it can devastate the whole litter, bless them. So Yehuva says in Germany, I think it is more or less the same. He was vaccinated in Ireland before he came to us. Yeah, I'm going to come on to vaccinations of greyhounds in racing and the implications that may have when you own them. So from the point of view of a vaccination schedule, your greyhound will have received their first vaccinations as a pup, which is a primary course of 2 doses 4 weeks apart. And that is done right at the start in the racing industry at about the same point that they are tattooed in their ears. So after that, different drugs can be given at different times or different intervals. So the first three, the distemper, the hepatitis, and the parvovirus, tends to be referred to as DHP. And if you have a vaccination certificate, which if I'd had any sense, I'd have fetched one down to show you, that will show on the sticker as DHP. And that can be given every 3 years. The things in that particular vaccine only need to be given 3 years because the immunity provided by its components lasts 3 years. However, the leptospirosis, both lepto2 and lepto4, only confers immunity for 1 year. Both of these, or all 4 of these, need to be given within 3 months of the date it was due. So you can have, in the case of the leptospirosis, 15 months, and in the case of the DHP, 3 years plus 3 months. You can have that long before the vet considers it to have expired or to have run out completely. And if that happens, even by a day, the vet will say you need to start again. So if you go to a vet where it has expired by more than a year and 3 months or 3 years and 3 months, they will start again with that primary course of 2 doses 4 weeks apart. And some vets are very, very particular about this. They will say it must be exactly 4 weeks. And my understanding is that it's to do with the license, the product. They can only guarantee the product is working if it is given at that date. I can remember once I went with Daisy when I hadn't had her long and she had to have a restart of L4. The vet gave her the first dose and didn't mention to me that she was going to need another one in 4 weeks' time. And that would have been really useful to tell me in advance because I wasn't able to go in 4 weeks' time. I can't remember, but I think we were about to go somewhere and I had to have the second dose done after 10 weeks. After 10 days, which meant that as far as the vet was concerned, that vaccine was not valid. And if I'd needed to take her to a boarding kennel, it probably wouldn't have been accepted. So it would have been really helpful if the vet had told me that before I took her in and the jab had been given, because I would have said, actually, no, don't do it. We'll come back later when we could come again in precisely 4 weeks' time. And I had to sign a form to say I recognise that it was not going to be valid because of that time interval not being correct. When it comes to kennel cough, this is slightly different. This is actually a squirt up the nose rather than an injection, and it needs to be given annually to maintain protection. So it lasts for a year, or it's deemed to last for a year once they've been given the vaccination. But if it lapses, you still only do 1 dose. So for kennel cough, if you were only, say, using boarding kennels occasionally and didn't have any other need for it, you would only perhaps need to have it done on the years that you would need the boarding kennels. And you could choose to not bother on other years because it wouldn't make any difference to the amount of vaccine the dog needed to receive in order to give them cover again. So you don't have this issue around a double dose. It's just 1 squirt up the nose, job done for a year. And at the end of the year, if you want to continue, another squirt up the nose. But you could leave it 18 months, you could leave it 3 years, and it would still be 1 squirt up the nose. So that one is a little bit different. It's not so important to maintain the sequence of products given at set intervals unless you particularly are keen to keep the cover for those set intervals. Let's have a quick look at the comments because I can see a few have popped up. So Angelica has said, again, the problem with the homeopathic remedy was that 1 kennel closed due to the person's death and the other made place for a light rail system. Oh gosh. The remedy is called kennel cough. The homeopathic vet will give advice. Interesting. And just trying to pull out Angelica's comments, and we dodged the shots up the nose, which one of my 2 dogs found objectionable. Yes, I agree. When I've had it done, mine have found that more unpleasant than having the needle at the back of the neck, to be fair. It's very quickly done, quick squirt up the nose, but I think they probably get to realise what's happening. So let me skip back to see where I was in the comments. So Marie said, we are meant to, but like you, nobody checks. So outbreaks of kennel cough and parvo were common and deadly. Yes, and there are different strains. I remember when I went to the vet last, they commented that they were seeing more cases of parvo, and it seemed to be more serious cases coming in than previously. So there clearly is some variation in it within the dog population. And Alison says that they had a Cavalier pup that died of parvo in the 80s. Yeah, that would have been when we lost the little Westie girl pup. Would have been in the 70s, actually, I think. Now, whether there was more around them because perhaps people were more aware of vaccinations, I don't have any recollection at all. When I grew up with dogs, but I don't have any recollection of taking them for vaccinations. But it might just have been it happened when I was at school or something and wasn't aware. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Marie says, New Zealand's vaccinations sound very similar to England. Never heard of distemper, but haven't had anything to do with puppies. Distemper in the UK is part of the set vaccination, DHP. So you can check on your vaccination certificate. In the UK, a standard vaccination would be one sticker for DHP, distemper, hepatitis, and parvovirus, and sometimes it has PI on the end, which is parainfluenza. Not always, but sometimes, and a separate sticker for the leptospirosis. So then if you get two stickers when you go, at least on some of the years, then you are getting probably DHP plus leptospirosis separately. So a standard certificate that I've got for mine, you would have like year 1 DHP plus lepto, year 2 lepto, year 3 lepto, year 4 DHP plus lepto. So you would see that change in the stickers that you get over a 3-year cycle. Yehu says, it's good that you're talking about the topic. I have to check up on his status with the vet. Yes, but you should be given a certificate, because if you are, say, taking him to a boarding kennels that requires it, they're going to want to see your certificate. If you haven't been given the certificate, then you might be able to get a printout of the records from the vet, which will tell you what was given and when, or they might be able to give you a written copy that covers that for you. So the schedule of the boosters, in theory, follows what I've just described. DHP every 3 years, leptospirosis every year, kennel cough every year if you are having it. However, it depends on the product used. So some manufacturers produce the main vaccines as 2 separate components. So you have one tube that's DHP, one tube that's lepto, and they mix it all together to squirt it in, but they can give one or the other. So if you look at the record card, you'll see differences in the stickers, which shows differences in the injections each year. However, in particular, I've never come across this with a vet that I use with my dogs as pets, but the vets that go to the racing tracks in the UK tend to use products which have it all combined in one dose. And that means that they're only licensed to be effective for a year, because the lepto only lasts 1 year, and it ignores the fact that the DHP part of what's in that tube could last for 3 years. And I think this is some of the reason why there are issues raised about over vaccination, because if you have one of those products where it's all inclusive, then your dog is getting the DHP part 3 times more often than it needs it. And it's not possible to separate it out because it all is in one go. Now, my theory is that the track vet does this because when you see the record of vaccination from the track, it is literally just a database with 2 different letters in it. There's a letter that shows they had a health check, and there's a letter to show they had a vaccination. There is no proper detail of the vaccination in the way that you would get them if you went to your vet and you get a card with the number from the vial or the sticker put on it, and a signature and a date of when the next vaccination is required. From the track, sometimes the best you get is a list of the races. This is the record printed off from the track. You get a list of the dog's races, and across the top, it just tells you the date of the last vaccination. So if they did that system of one part every 3 years and one part every year, how would you know what was due next? I think it makes life much easier for them if they have everything every year, because the vet knows every year they give everything. That's just my theory. I'm happy to listen to some alternative suggestions if you have them. But what it can mean is that while they are in racing, they get far more of the DHP parts of the vaccine than is necessary, and there is no choice over that. If they use one of those combined vaccinations where it's all in together, the leptospirosis will be L2. It isn't available currently with L4. So your dog would get distemper, hepatitis, parvovirus, and leptospirosis, 2 variations of. If your vet uses leptospirosis as a separate vaccine when you got that dog home and you've adopted them, then next year, when you take that card to the vet, they have 2 possibilities. Firstly, your vet has some L2 in their fridge, and they can just give them L2 that year. Second option, which is what has happened with me umpteen times now, your vet uses L4. And if your vet uses L4, your dog will need a restart of the leptospirosis part. So this was what happened to me with Daisy. She came technically fully vaccinated, but not with Lepto4, which meant that next year I had to take her to the vet, and the vet said, oh, she needs Lepto4. That's what we've got in our fridge. And therefore she had to have a restart. So it's possible, even if the dog comes to you technically fully vaccinated, you will have to have some degree of restart of their vaccinations the following year because of the nature of the vaccine that has been given before. So we have some more comments popped up. Alison also is going to check up on vaccinations. And Marie says, sometimes our fosters don't come with records, so we have to start again. That is also a question. If the dog doesn't arrive with the vaccination card, my experience has been it's now impossible to get hold of it, because I think once they've left the vet, the track has very little interest in providing that information. So if it gets lost in transit, or it's illegible, or something's missing, it's just hard luck. And then potentially, if you have to start again, the dog is getting over vaccinated because you don't know what's there already. They might be fine, but you don't have a record. So you really have 2 issues. There's the issue of, are they vaccinated? And there's the issue of, have I got an accurate record of the vaccination? So the Greyhound Board of Great Britain requires the dog to be vaccinated during their racing career, and the records are kept at the track. They're vaccinated by the track vet. And in theory, that should be kept up to date once they retire. I have not found anything in the Greyhound Board of Great Britain's notes or recommendations that says that you can stop vaccinating them once they retire. However, in practice, in the UK at least, it's just not that clear cut. And over the 4 years I was involved in the welfare side of things with a Greyhound charity, I found that we regularly received dogs from trainers whose vaccinations were either incomplete, out of date, or you had not a cat in hell's chance of understanding what it actually said. And sadly, this was not necessarily addressed by the charity before they went to a new home. And this was made more complicated because it can be really hard to get a full record of their vaccination history from the track. So some of the things that can be a problem that you might want to look at if you are getting a new dog, and I'm not saying this would put you off having that dog, but it was important because it could affect you later on and affect the dog later on. So a typical vaccination card from the track is literally an A5 sheet of printed paper, and all it shows on it is the last thing they had. So if the dog is 5, you've got 4.5 previous years of vaccination history you have no clue about, and all it shows is the last vaccination. And I have known that to show just L2, which means you have no clue when the DHP is due. And therefore, that dog would be considered not fully vaccinated as far as the record is concerned. The chances are they are, but you don't know, do they need the DHP next year or do they need it the year after? So when you go to your vet, they're going to have to start them again because you just don't know. Sometimes it shows that they might have been given a booster, but the card shows that the time since the previous vaccination was too long. So longer than the 3 months extra grace period that you're allowed. And I don't understand why the track vets do it, but I've seen plenty of cards where they have been left for too long between doses. So they should have been given a restart, but they weren't. So then again, when you go to your vet will say this dog needs to start again. Sometimes I've seen ones where maybe they had one year and then there's a year's gap and then they had one the year after. Well, there are no vaccinations with a 2-year interval between doses. So that latest vaccination is as good as void because they should have had the second dose and they didn't. And the other issue that we used to regularly see is you just could not read the writing. Maybe there were no stickers from the vials. Not having stickers is okay, but the vet should write the numbers down and they should then sign it. And sometimes there was no signature. Or you were there scratching your head trying to decipher the date that it was given, to the point that it could have been, she says scratching her head, it could have been quite a wide range of possible months because you just could not read it. And if you cannot read it, again, it's as good as invalid because what is your vet supposed to do when you take the dog to be vaccinated? So in all of these cases, the dog may well be fully vaccinated and covered, but your vet could still decide they need to restart the vaccination because of lack of information or incomplete information, which again can lead them to having more doses than is strictly necessary at that time. So if you adopt a Greyhound and are told that they're vaccinated, which by and large you probably would be told, I would always show your vet the certificate to be sure of their vaccination status. Definitely do not assume that the card you're given by the charity or other organisation will allow them to be accepted at a boarding kennels or a daycare or a secure field or something, because it might not. The requirements at those places can be very strict. And if the certificate shows any gaps, it can't be read, there's something missing, they will turn you away. And the last thing you need is to be turned away on the morning of the day you're dropping the dog off and your flight is later that afternoon and you thought they were going to be boarded and now they can't be. So it's important to check it in advance and get your vet's advice. So if that is the situation, then you have two choices. You could either have a restart straight away, or you could wait till next time when you think it's due and have a restart then. In terms of over-vaccination and the risk of over-vaccination, waiting till the next due date is probably safer. So it really comes down to, are you going to need them to be somewhere where that certificate is important before their next vaccination is due? And then it's between you and your vet to discuss what to do. But if you want to avoid the over-vaccination risk, then I would probably wait till they're next due and deal with it then. So I've also seen certificates where the record shows that the vaccination has not been given according to the license schedule. So by this, what I mean is, it's a bit like if you buy some medication from the chemist, if you even say a package of paracetamol, it will tell you when it expires. Vaccinations have a best before date on the vial, but also they are deemed to be effective for a certain period of time. and they must be repeated within that period of time. So the license given to that medication specifies how frequently it must be given to the animal. And what I have seen is that dogs at the track have been given a vaccination that has been licensed to be valid for 1 year, but the vet has managed to give them the DHP part separately from the leptospirosis part, and they've done it every 3 years instead of annually. So that is good from the point of view of not over vaccinating, but your vet is going to look at that and said this dog needs to start again because it's not according to the license schedule. They would consider the dog not to have a valid vaccination. And again, if you plan to use boarding kennels, so on, it won't be acceptable. So the vet has done something that's beneficial for the dog's health, but it depends if you need that certificate or not. So again, it's a good reason to double check with the vet as soon as you get them. Most vets, when you register your dog with the vet, they may well say, do you want to come in and have a quick health check at the start? So if you are going to do that, I would take your certificate with you and ask the vet to have a look and get their opinion on it if you don't feel too sure about it yourself. So at least you know where you stand before it becomes an issue for you. So I would be interested to hear if any of you have had issues of this sort when you adopted your Greyhound. Let us know in the comments. And I'm going to have a look at some of the comments now. So where had I got to? Let's see. So Lynn says, Skip had no vaccinations for 3.5 years as he'd been ill. I then titer tested him and he was still fully immune. Yeah, I think the thing with the 3 years and 1 year is that it's a bit like that expiry date on your paracetamol or the sell-by date on your loaf of bread. It could well be fine after that, but they haven't tested it in the lab. So they say 3 years or 5 years because that's what they've tested. And it was exactly the same with all the COVID stuff and the flu vaccination, etc. They're only going to say it's valid for the length of time they have tested it for. It could be valid for much longer, but unless they do the tests over that time period, they don't know. And they're only going to tell you what they know because they can't otherwise quote it. And we will come on to titer tests in a little while. Emma's 11, Alison says, and people have told me not to renew vaccinations. What do you think? I'm going to kind of come on to that a little bit in a minute. But yes, I agree. There's a question mark. And Barbara says, we got a full pet passport with all the vaccinations. I think otherwise they would not have transported him. Of course, I do not know if they just gave him everything again before transport. It could have been either. The latter part of more recently, I've noticed a lot of the Greyhounds coming into the kennels have a pet passport. I think if they come from Ireland now, they need a pet passport quite often. And obviously it needed to be valid for travel. And some of them are even coming in with a rabies vaccination as well. And it has to be valid for travel. So they will have given the dog whatever was required in order for them to be able to travel into the country. And unless you've been given the previous record as well, you don't know what they've had before, but at least you know that what's on there has to be above board because they wouldn't have got into the country otherwise. So you probably can rest assured that you are okay for the first year if you have a pet passport that they travelled into the country with. So let's think about the vaccination appointment briefly. Before vaccinating your dog, your vet gives them a check over, looks at their heart, lungs, and so on, and asks you about their general health. And I have found it's a good opportunity to ask them about anything that might be bothering you, relatively minor things, bearing in mind you don't always get the most senior vet for a vaccination appointment. But if there was anything niggling you, you might want to mention it. And it means that your dog is getting a health check every year. So if you don't vaccinate and you don't go for a health check, you are missing that opportunity as well. Just something to bear in mind. We said that kennel cough is given as a squirt up the nose, but the main vaccines are a vaccination, given as an injection under the skin in the back of the neck. And I'll never forget my first. She screamed the place down when she saw the needle. The vet hadn't come anywhere near her, but she screamed and screamed and screamed. And that taught me a very valuable lesson, which is now I advocate for my dog whenever we go for something that will involve needles. And I am holding the dog's head, giving them a cuddle, talking sweet nothings in their ear. And then I'll say to the vet, don't show him or her the needle. And I will ask the vet to prepare the vaccine such that the dog doesn't see it. I make sure the dog doesn't see it. The vet then approaches from behind, pinches the skin at the back of the neck and does the injection. And the dog doesn't generally bat an eyelid. But after that first experience, just the sight of the needle had her screaming. Clearly she'd had a bad experience before. And even with her, if she didn't see the needle coming, she didn't even notice it had been done. The vaccination is not normally painful, but it can feel cold or sting a little bit. So they might react a bit, but they shouldn't be giving you a scream of death, bless them. Similar to with human vaccines, you can get side effects, but it should be rare. And most dogs don't experience any at all. If your dog does have side effects, they're likely to be mild, such as a high temperature or low energy or a bit off their food for a few hours, maybe a couple of days at the most. There can be residual issues with the vaccine itself, such as an allergic response or a problem if the dog is immunosuppressed. And there can be an element of toxicity, but I think these can come from the vaccine, not the vaccine itself, but rather from the other stuff that's in the tube, which I think is also the issue with human vaccines and vaccination. It's not the actual vaccine, it's the stuff they mix with the vaccine in order to give it to you. So do let us know in the comments as well if you prefer not to vaccinate your dog and what prompted that decision. So any issues you've had with your Greyhound and the vaccination card not showing the right things, or if you prefer not to vaccinate and what prompted you to not vaccinate, do let us know in the comments. It'd be really interesting to see your thoughts on this. So Lynn says Nadia had immunity to some diseases when she was titer tested after 3 years. Yeah, it really is quite surprising how long it lasts. And Big Pop CEO says, hi everyone, sorry I'm late. No problem at all. Hello, thank you for joining us. And you can always watch the first half of it on the replay later. So do let us know. Do you vaccinate? Don't you vaccinate? Let's have a straw poll. Tell me, do you vaccinate your dog or do you prefer not to vaccinate your dog? Excuse my silly, yes. It's really awkward because I don't know what to call you other than Big Popper. So it always sounds a bit weird calling people by their funny names. So I'm going to say start a poll. I'm going to put this in here. I have not done this before. This is new. Let's say, do you vaccinate? Yes or no? Start poll. Okay. We'll see what happens there. I've just put up a poll up so you can have a go. Vote, do you vaccinate or don't you vaccinate? It's quite simple, yes or no. I'll leave you to fill that in while I'm carrying on a little bit. So do answer yes or no to do you vaccinate. So thinking about possible reactions to vaccinating your dog. To give you an idea of how likely this is to occur, I have some figures for you. I had a look online, got some figures off some scientific papers. In the USA, the risk of an adverse event was approximately 0.4%. In the UK, it was approximately 0.001%. So really very small risk of an event. If an event was going to happen, they normally occurred within the same day, often within 12 hours. And in the case of serious reactions and allergic reactions, such as anaphylaxis, within minutes, so probably before you've even left the vets. And what I think is interesting to us as owners of relatively large dogs in greyhounds is that the risk was significantly greater for small dogs than large dogs. And that makes a lot of sense to me because there is just one volume dose. They don't give the itty bitty little teacup dogs a tiny dose and the wolfhounds a huge dose. There is one dose. So if you are a Chihuahua, you get an awful lot more vaccine per unit body weight than if you are a Great Dane. So in a Japanese study, which had a much higher rate of adverse effects at 0.63%, so more than in the USA and much more than in the UK, adverse events were most frequently found in dogs that weighed under 5 kilos, which is really, really tiny. I'm not quite sure what size dog that would be, but when I think Gandalf here weighs 36, it's like, you know, a seventh of his body weight. It was little lap dogs that were at risk. And I think this, from other things that I've read, is at least in part because those little dogs are proportionally getting a much bigger dose of vaccine because there is no variation in what is available for body weight. So this does suggest that greyhounds are not the most likely candidates to suffer an adverse effect unless they have an undiagnosed health condition that puts them at greater risk. So if your dog is otherwise healthy, you have a very low chance of an adverse event happening to your dog. I know that doesn't make it better when it does happen, but the chance is really very small. And we do need to bear in mind that the diseases that they protect against are really quite nasty. It's not just stopping them have, you know, a bit of a cold. These are things that can kill them. Maybe not the kennel cough, although that can be nasty. But for the others, it is stuff that is really quite serious. But if you are concerned about giving your greyhound an annual vaccination, an alternative to this is titer testing. So far in my poll, I can see virtually all of you have said, yes, you vaccinate. So we've got a few of you out there that aren't vaccinating. So if you don't vaccinate, do you titer test or do you just cross your fingers and hope for the best? Let us know in the comments. So titer testing is an alternative that you can consider. It's a set of blood tests that need to be taken by the vet to check the level of immunity that is present in their system. So if they've had vaccines in the past, like Lynn's dogs have had vaccines in the past, and she titer tested after 3 years of no vaccinations, there was still immunity there. So the vet does a blood test, they send it off, they can tell you whether your dog is still protected against certain diseases or if their immunity has gone. So if you get that titer test back and it says the dog's immunity is gone, then you would want to consider revaccinating them. So this goes back to Alison's question about older dogs and having immunity from before. I have seen arguments saying that once they get past middle age, you don't need to keep vaccinating them, which may or may not be true. But if you want to be sure, the best thing to do would be to have the titer test done by your vet, and then you would be able to have the peace of mind that knowing that they have the immunity still from their previous years of vaccination, or whether you do need to vaccinate. So there are times when the dog may need the titer to confirm their protection for a particular disease for other reasons, such as if they've had the rabies vaccine, they have to check that it has worked if they're traveling to certain countries. But by and large, most vets are likely to recommend it if you're concerned about repeatedly giving the vaccination. So if you're concerned about a build-up of the vaccine in the body, or if you're concerned about them having an allergic reaction because they reacted badly previously, then you might want to consider this instead. However, it's not a permanent alternative to having vaccination boosters if the dog's immunity runs out eventually, because at that point, you either have to say, okay, the dog's unprotected and I accept that, or you need to have them start again. And if it's DHP and leptospirosis, you're going to have a double dose. So if you ended up doing it every 2 or 3 years, you don't actually end up giving them much less vaccine, and they're getting 2 doses in quick succession. So I think it's also worth considering the impact of what will happen when that immunity is expired. So that is something to consider. There is also the issue that maybe the vet isn't able to supply one part. So maybe you discovered that the parvovirus is still working, but the DHP and the hepatitis aren't. Does the vet have those particular vaccines separately, or will they only administer all 3 in one lot? And that is really down to your individual vet. Some might not. So that's worth considering, and to discuss with your vet. If I titer test and it proves they are not protected against any one of the 4 key ones, can you vaccinate just for that one, or will I have to have all of them again? So there are pros and cons. Another limitation is that it shows you the level of protection they have at the time of the blood test, but you don't know if that will continue for the whole of the next year. If you have them vaccinated, then they are covered for the next year or 3 years. If you titer test, it might not still be there in a year's time. So you never know quite when it's going to run out. And when it runs out, you've got to start again with that double dose. Other things to consider is that there is no titer test available at the moment for leptospirosis, as far as I'm aware. So if you want them protected against leptospirosis, then you have to do that one anyway, even if they're protected against the others. If you have the titer test done, you have the cost of the test. And if your dog shows they don't have immunity, you then have the cost of the vaccine. So it can end up costing you more. If cost is an issue, that might be something you need to bear in mind. And if your dog isn't that happy about going into the vets, you also need to bear in mind that you could end up with additional trips. You need to go in to have the test taken. They need to go back for the vaccines if they're needed. They might have to go back for the second dose. So you could end up with more trips to the vet depending on the outcome, which again might be something to bear in mind. Another issue is that your insurance may specify how these diseases must be protected against in order for your insurance to be valid. So some companies may say the dog must be vaccinated. Not all of them will accept titer testing, or they may exclude the conditions that would normally be vaccinated for. So if the dog did catch distemper, you wouldn't be insured for their treatment. And as with vaccinations, the insurance is unlikely to pay for the testing in the way that they don't pay for vaccinations. So if you are going to go down the titer testing route, then it is also worth checking that your insurance is happy with you taking that option, that you are still covered if you take that option. So if you decide not to vaccinate your dog, then it makes sense to keep them away from other dogs and to avoid walking in areas where many other dogs have been. So depending on your lifestyle, if we flip that around, it may be that your dog is less in need of vaccinating if you have a lifestyle that doesn't take them into contact with lots of other dogs. Certainly, I follow that principle when it comes to flea and worm treatment. Maybe if I had a little spaniel that spent all its time running around in the undergrowth and playing with dogs off lead in a park, I might need to flea and worm them regularly to protect them. But because my dogs generally are walking on pavements, we don't go places with lots of undergrowth very often, and they're certainly not running around off lead, getting in the bushes, sticking their noses in questionable things. We don't generally have an issue with fleas, touch wood, or with worms, and I flea and worm treat them once in a blue moon because they are, to my mind, not high risk. I always have product available, so if I did want to do them or I discovered any signs of an issue, I can do them straight away, but I don't do them routinely every few months because effectively that's putting an insecticide in their body and a nematicide, I think it is, in their body, which I decide not to do unless I see a problem. So the same could apply for unvaccinated dogs. If you keep them somewhere, if your lifestyle does not put them at higher risk and they're older, you might decide you don't want to have it done. Another precaution if they're unvaccinated is you need to avoid high areas of risk for leptospirosis. So leptospirosis will come from places where farm animals and rats tend to live. So if you're walking across boggy fields or you're exploring ponds and stagnant water and rivers, they're more likely to pick up leptospirosis than if you only walk on city streets, as I do at the moment. So again, high risk versus low risk can affect whether or not you feel it's important. I'm told leptospirosis is a particularly nasty disease, so it is good to have the animal protected, but if they're not going to be doing stuff that brings them into contact with that disease, it's not so important. So if the greyhound is mainly on lead and walking with you on a pavement, they're not going to be as at risk. I suspect that secure fields could pose a higher risk because if the regulations for hiring that field may say you must have X, Y, and Z vaccines, but unless the owners of the field check your vaccination certificate before you go and use it, anyone can use it. And no one would know if their dog had got that disorder or not. And of course, if they're on a farm or there's some ponds or streams that go through it, that's still not going to control wildlife that is in that area that things could be passed around with. So just some things you might want to bear in mind if you decide you don't want to vaccinate your dog for whatever reason. For me, the jury is still out. I've not had titer testing done. And I keep thinking to myself, maybe when they get to 10, I'll stop. And then I keep losing them younger than that, so it's not an issue. My next one where that will become an issue is AJ, because he's going to reach 10 soon, and there'll be, do I have him done next year or not? I don't know. He's never had a bad reaction to it. And so I think the temptation is to have it done, better safe than sorry. But of course, we all make our own decisions as to what we feel is best for our dog. Let's take a look at some of the questions from the chat. What else have we got? So Lynn, titer tested and then vaccinated for the diseases where the vaccinations had lapsed. And Alison says, I would still have her vaccinated. I'd be terrified she'd get ill. Yeah, I mean, if the dog doesn't have a bad reaction, and we've said it's relatively low risk for a dog of this size in the UK, then if it gives you peace of mind, then it's probably worth doing. And Susie says, my boy never goes to kennels, 11-and-a-half-year-old with her 8 years and has been vaccinated every year. But this year I'm considering not doing it because some vaccines are harsh on the kidneys. This is, again, it's all about weighing up the pros and cons. And at that age, the chances are he has a lot of immunity from before with those previous years of vaccination. Again, you could titer test and see what he's got. And if he had everything last year, you could maybe just do the leptospirosis and then call it a day. Or it's a tricky one. It really is. I think perhaps more so with with crossbreeds, my experience of crossbreeds is they live much longer than a greyhound. When I was a child, we had crossbreeds that lived up to 18, 19 years. So a much longer lifespan to have an annual vaccination anyway. Alison says Emma never goes into kennels, which is the same with mine. We don't go anywhere where it's a requirement. So if I didn't have it done, it wouldn't be an issue. But if you do want to keep that option open to you, it's not something you can fix at short notice. Sometimes people have to keep that option open just in case of a family emergency or something. And if the dog wasn't fully vaccinated, the kennels wouldn't take them. So sometimes it's necessary to have peace of mind in that respect, as well as peace of mind about the care of the dog. Forza says, I did vaccinate my 8-year-old until recently, then the vaccines were changed to the mRNA type. Yeah, so different products, different risks, all things to bear in mind. And Susie says that she might titer test and take it from there. Yeah, if you do decide to titer test, let us know what the feedback is, because I think it will be really interesting to get a bigger idea of, if people have titer tested, have the dogs tended to come back as still showing immunity, or have they tended to need vaccination? Is this idea that when they get to middle age, you can stop valid or not? I might have a little poke around and see if I can find any information on that online. I did some research for this session looking at adverse effects, but I didn't look into see if I could find any research that looked at just how long does immunity last after a vaccination. So I might have a poke around, see if I can find something on that for you. And Susie says he's not due till September. So yes, let us know in the autumn, Susie. There's a little way to go yet. So any more questions that you have, any more thoughts, any more comments, please pop them in the chat before we wrap up. I'm getting longer each time. I sure have to try and rein myself in a little bit. So if you've enjoyed this month's live stream and would like to support the channel, remember you have the option to use the donation button to make a one-off contribution, or you can donate on any of our videos or shorts. And to get more of the same each month, please also consider becoming a channel member. And you can click on the link in the description to find out more about that and how to join. And we've got another couple of comments. Oh yes, I always forget that, David. I must write that down in big letters, and do hit the like button. I always forget to say that. Barbara says, thanks a lot, very informative. Thank you. And Forza is asking about bad reactions from Bravecto and Milbimax. They are both flea and wormers, I believe. Had to change to Bob Martin and Frontline after a recent bad reaction. I've never used Bob Martin. I used to use Frontline quite commonly, but if you want heartworm or lungworm, you need a different product to that. And I know some people are questioning the efficacy of Frontline these days. I think in some areas the fleas are becoming resistant to it. We're getting a race of super fleas out there. I've seen a few things on social media where people are having terrible trouble with fleas and they've had to stop using Frontline. So that is something to bear in mind as well. I've used something with the same equivalent ingredients as Milbimax, but I don't think it was a different brand of the same ingredients, and didn't have a problem with that. I haven't used Bravecto. Barbara says, I hope Gandalf has a lot of fun with the balls. When he's finally allowed to open the packet, I'm sure he'll have lots of fun with them. Thankfully, he's given up trying to steal them from me. So one last thing to say is thank you so much to Alison for her donation. That's very kind of you, Alison. Thank you. And I'm going to love you and leave you. We'll be back again for the super fans session next Monday. So if you're a member, I will be doing a session next Monday looking at unwanted behaviour that is open to superfan members. So you would need to join the channel at the superfan level to join us next Monday. And I'll be back again on the 26th of February for bits and pieces. So keep an eye on the community post for more information about that. And let me know any topics you'd like me to bring up in the bits and pieces live stream. And I hope you'll be able to join me then. So a big thank you to everyone that's been here this evening. I hope you found it useful, that you've learned something about vaccinations that you didn't know before. And I'll see you again next month, or indeed later on this month. So bye for now, everyone.